Hello and welcome to WNRD. We're Radio Nerd America. This is our first podcast, so apologize a little bit of the rough edges we have going on here. I'm Michael Diaz, and here with me is
Alan.
And we're geeks, and we want to talk about nerd stuff. So kind of started this podcast off, and we're gonna kind of hit the ground running. We're gonna start right in with what we call our 1 to 10 scale. We decided when we're going to start this podcast, we needed to kind of have a frame of reference as to where things lie on the geek range. What's the worst and what's the best?
Yeah, and the scale is focused around sort of sci-fi, fantasy type things, right? So whenever we talk about something, a series, we can refer to our original scale and say, well, it was as good as this or not as good as that. We kind of needed that reference point.
Exactly, and not everyone's going to agree with this scale. I'm sure there are passionate people all along this line.
And comment in on the MP3 or anything online. Let us know, because we know the scale isn't perfect either, and we can't think of everything. So, give us your feedback on the scale.
Exactly. So let's start just dive right into that scale. We're going to start at the bottom, what we think is the worst.
The worst sci-fi or fantasy type thing.
Right. Something that's just execrable. We agreed almost wholeheartedly that has to be Battlefield Earth.
Yeah, Battlefield Earth. Now, by the way, we argued a lot more. Well, I shouldn't say we argued. We struggled more about the really bad stuff, the very bottom of the scale, because it's hard to find stuff that has very little redeeming quality about it. But yeah, I think in the whole nerd culture, sci-fi culture, I think everybody sort of agrees Battlefield Earth is one of the worst. Exactly,
and we'll touch on this a little bit later in the program. But even the wonderful Forest Whitaker, as fantastic as an actor as he is and how much gravitas and power he brings to a role, he could not save Battlefield Earth.
No, yeah, it was unsavable. Okay, so let's not spend too much time on the bad parts. So, one up from that, we chose the movie Ultraviolet.
Yes.
Which I think we both felt was a huge sort of weird letdown. I mentioned it was the only movie in the theater I went to see and walked out of before it was over.
I actually stayed through the whole thing, hope against hope, that it would redeem itself in some way, shape, or form.
It had some interesting effects and some good use of color and things like that, but it just wasn't. That's not enough.
To tie into this just a little bit, the same guy that made Ultraviolet is also the same guy that did Equilibrium, which is absolutely one of my favorite B-grade sci-fi movies of all time. So he did so well with that, they gave him some money and said, hey, make another film, and he should not have.
So thus, it's the number 2 on the scale.
Other quick side note on that, just real quick. One thing that got me excited when I did go see the movie, they used a bunch of comic book artists in the opening, and one of the pages, the splash pages, is by this comic book artist, Dustin Nguyen, who I just adore. So I was like, this movie's got to be good, and it was.
Okay, number 3, third worst. The 1980s. What do we want to call this genre? Quasi-horror, evil things from space, Critters.
Yeah, I admit I like the first one. It's enjoyable for what it is. It's total 80s straight-to-cable.
Campy, kind of really goofy.
I have to believe I've seen at least 1 or 2 of the sequels.
Yeah, I know I've seen a couple of them, at least bits and pieces.
But I can't really remember them. That's how bad they were. But
yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I guess maybe that was part of it. Like, you're not really scared of them because they're kind of cute, but then they bite your face off kind of thing.
And I have no problem with camp, but this was just low budget, and you can tell.
Yeah, and then let's be honest, too. When we get down to number 3, 4, and 5, these aren't things that are necessarily bad.
Right.
They're just not great.
Exactly. This is definitely not great.
Yeah, okay. So next one.
For 4, we're talking more like the Falling Skies, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. level.
Yeah, I remember we debated about this one because you knew a lot more about Falling Skies. I didn't. I never really got into it. I
was fully invested into Falling Skies for at least 2 or 3 seasons, and at some point I just said, nope.
Yeah, and for me with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it was something that had a lot of promise, but we talked about at least I didn't like it as much because it didn't tie in enough to the universe. It was it felt kind of like a half-assed take at the universe, right? And they would mention a movie every now and then, and when they would mention a movie, the forums would go wild the next day. People, they mentioned Civil War, and it's like, you're excited about that? They should be doing more.
I agree. I mean, especially now that we've had some time and we've seen what Netflix can do with some of the more adult style Marvel shows, I think that solidifies Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. down at number 4 for me. Just because...
Below the halfway mark, for sure.
Yeah. Just because Netflix has shown how to do a comic book show. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so getting up to the 50% mark here. So this was a good one. I liked it. This is where you start to realize stuff starts to get not so bad, right? So number 5, we have 2 things here. First is the GoBots, which were great. I mean, they're no Transformers. They're a total Transformers knockoff, but they're still very much enjoyable. And then the second one was the movie series. I guess you want to call it a series. Most of us think of it just one movie, I think, at this point. But Tremors.
Yeah. I mean, Tremors is a little bit more successful in the camp genre. I mean, when we go talk back to Critters, they're both low budget, Tremors and Critters, but...
Well, like Tremors 3 and 4 are like equivalent to Critters, right?
Oh, yeah. But right from the get-go, I think Tremors knew what its audience was and put their tongue firmly in cheek. This was not going to be highbrow in any way, shape, or form.
But I mean, the first one was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
We have to take into account, that's the thing with this thing, we have to take account of the whole universe, everything that's attached to it. And that's why when you start to get Tremors 2 and 3 and all that kind of stuff, that drags it down quite a bit.
Yeah, any brand is going to be depleted at that point. But yes, the first one was very enjoyable. It was
Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon.
McIntyre.
Exactly. Well, don't forget Family Ties, Michael Gross.
Oh, there was a handful of good people in that movie. That was a good movie.
From there, we move on to DC Comics.
DC Comics in general.
Yes.
Number 6. 10 being the best.
Yes. DC has some really high points, but they also have some really low points. So
if we were just talking Batman and Superman and Justice League, they'd be much higher.
Oh, definitely.
But 80% of their roster is stuff that most nerds in general public just don't care about.
Well, yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, I'll go ahead. There are people that are DC devotees, and they're going to love them no matter what. But just like the other flip side of that coin is the Marvel Zombies. So for our money, though, DC they're good, but they could be better.
Yeah, and I'm a DC hater. I'll put that out there. Outside of, like I said, the top 5% of their characters, after that, I really don't care.
I grew up Marvel. It wasn't until I was in junior high that I was really exposed to DC. There are some titles of theirs that I absolutely adore, and to this day I still read, but yeah, they could do better.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so going back up to number 7. So this was getting tough, right? Because we have got stuff that's pretty good, but not the best, right? So number 7, we have a 3-way tie between Firefly, Evangelion, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, I may not share the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles love that Alan does, just because I think you were a little bit younger than I am, so it was more your time period.
Yeah, when we have these 2-way and 3-way things, that's where we really had to hash it out between us and come to some agreements on these. But so Firefly, I think we all agree, was pretty good, right? It's well loved by many people.
Oh yeah, and the only reason it's lower than I think maybe could have been is because it didn't have long enough to really show. I mean, fantastic first season.
Yeah,
loved the movie.
I mean, maybe it was a little bit wrong place, wrong time, right?
Exactly. Nowadays, I think if that came out on Netflix now, people freaking out.
And maybe it will. Maybe it will come back. Evangelion, one of my favorite anime series. It's been redone 4 or 5 times. Part of the reason it's been redone like that because they know it's like the movie Contact, right? Like it was 90% great, but they just couldn't get the last 10%. So, giant mech machines fighting monsters from outside of this galaxy. Whole cities getting leveled and demolished, that sort of big scale, religious ties. I mean, I think it was really well done. And then Ninja Turtles gets thrown in there too, and that's where I put up a pretty hard fight for them, saying like, look, Ninja Turtles influenced so many, like a whole generation of kids, right?
Oh yeah.
And even though the movies aren't great, the toys, we got to take into account toys here, right? This is when we see the whole universe. They're a really successful toy line. They worked on kids my age when I grew up in the 80s. And then I have nephews now that love Ninja Turtles as well, and they're 5 years old right now. So there's a certain staying power there.
I can't disagree. My brother just turned 31 this year. He grew up. Ninja Turtles were his thing. Loved them absolutely to death. So I don't argue too much. Just personally, it's not high for me.
Yeah, and as we get into the upper ends of the list here, we kind of had to discuss and say, well, look, if each of these universes sort of had a stock or had a net worth, what would that value be? And that's where we say, like, well, Ninja Turtles' sort of net worth would be pretty high, whereas even though we both love Firefly, it didn't take up a lot of mind space in a lot of people's worlds, right? I mean, nerds and geeks like us, we love it, but it didn't really cross over.
Right. I mean, I've exposed it to everyone I can, and most people that I've said you
fighting the good fight.
Exactly. But this year, 10 plus years after cancellation in movie, you're not going to get a lot of converts.
Yeah. Okay, number 8. This one's all you, really, because I got to admit, I'm yet to delve into this universe, and I need to.
And that is a horrible mistake in your life.
Like, you can only get into so many at once.
That is true, and it is an undertaking. I mean, you got 4 seasons. But yeah, number 8, we put Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined, not the early 80s one, or I should say late 70s one.
Because I even think you wanted to put it higher, and then I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, I heard it was really bad. And you were like, no, the original one was bad.
The original one is bad, and, if I think about it back with my 5 and 6 and 7-year-old mind, the original was amazing, but then watching it as I was an adult, you see that the same stock photography is used over and over and over. Like, there was no special effects budget.
Yeah, and at my age level, too, the original one was literally before my time. So I had no nostalgia for it when the new one came out.
Right, and I fully admit, nostalgia pushed me for the first one. The story is what kept me going along.
And Edward James Olmos.
Oh, what does he bat in? The guy's fantastic.
He carries a franchise.
He does. And then not just him. There's some great acting done in that show. But I kind of had to agree that the reason the show falters, and this is totally my opinion, some people share it, some fans love it. For me, the show did not stick the landing. So the show was fantastic until the end. If they had stuck the landing, 10 all day, but I'm going to have to put them in 8 because of that.
Okay, so I still have to go back and watch it to give it its due and really see if that 8's a solid placement for it. But I'll give you the credit for that. Okay, number 9, I shouldn't say highly debatable. It's probably legitimate here. It's just not one of my things, but I know it's the thing of many, many people, which is Star Trek.
Whoa, I think you skipped one. Didn't you skip 8.5, or we're not going to talk about that?
Oh, sorry, yeah, we did skip 8.5. Okay. So that's why see, like we said, I knew we just did 8 and I jumped to 9. Well, the reason was we had so much controversy at the top, we had to include an 8.5, which is 3 additional series. So that explains my error. 8.5, Gundam, X-Men, and The Walking Dead.
Yes. Walking Dead obviously is still going. It could fall, it could raise based on how the series continues. But as it is right now, it seems to be one of those still water cooler shows that people
crossed over.
Yes. It's got massive, wide appeal.
I mean, it didn't invent the zombie genre. It wasn't the first to try it. There's been a lot of successful things prior, but nothing has been able to cross over the way this has.
Exactly.
Based on a comic.
Based on the comic. Just to harken back just a little bit to Battlestar, I think what makes this show work so well is the interpersonal relationships. It's the characters. People get fully invested in these characters. When someone dies, it breaks the internet.
Yeah.
People can't stop talking about it. I'm going to kind of hand it over to you on Gundam. I am a fan of certain series, and I have some Gundam myself, but I think that's a little bit more your area.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't really, again, I'm not 100% in-depth into the Gundam world, but I just know the sort of power it has, right? I mean, Gundam is generally the giant mech robot culture is known as being the one that started it all, right? Maybe it's not the first one, right? But it's just, and it's got staying power. And if you go to Japan, there's only one, actually in the whole world probably, there's only one life-size mech robot statue that exists.
And you've been there.
And I've been there, and I bought the tchotchkes and all that kind of stuff. And it's
How
Gundam.
could you not? I have to admit, if I happen to be there and there is a life-size Gundam, how can you not go see it?
Yeah, and when I go to Asia to the toy stores and stuff, and it's like half of every toy store is full of Gundam robots and ships and stuff. And so, you just that's the one you just got to give credit where credit's due. You know what I mean? Even though neither of us really are sort of on the pulse of Gundam, I think we both had respect for the franchise.
Oh, definitely.
And then on top of that, there is X-Men, which for 8.5, based on our scale, as I'm looking at it now, we didn't pull out Marvel as a whole like we did DC, and I think we just didn't know where to place it. But I think we felt that X-Men was strong enough on its own, quite possibly the strongest franchise within Marvel, to be this high.
Oh, yeah. All right, now we're talking You're talking comics and movies?
Well, when we're talking the whole franchise. So even though the movies aren't great, we have toys, we have comics, right? And there's, I think I may have made the argument that within the X-Men universe, I believe personally, there's more strong characters, villains in the entire DC universe. Just in terms of how they've crossed over and how people like them. And the amount of toys people have, Halloween costumes, all of that stuff.
I think you'll upset people with that comment, but I can't disagree with you.
Yeah, totally. I agree. They're probably going to get upset as well, but I don't think they can disagree if we break the facts out. So that's where we had 8.5. Pretty good stuff there.
Though that said, I will say this. Since we've had this ranking, X-Men, the Apocalypse movie came out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that affects that. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, wait a minute.
So I'm just saying.
You're trying to throw something out there that you haven't even seen and use it for something, but you haven't seen it. So
I'm just saying the buzz was not good on the movie, so much so that I wasn't interested in seeing it.
No, I mean, I think the X-Men movies sort of generally under-deliver, but let's not forget either, the X-Men movies, the original first ones, were probably the ones that made it known that, hey, there's something here in this comic book universe that we can make a lot of money on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, would the Marvel series be where it's at now if the X-Men series weren't, although not well done, they brought in a lot of money?
Oh, yeah. Looking back on it, the first X-Men movie is probably not the best movie, but when they first did it, you're like, yes, this is how they should be doing comic book movies.
Right, and everybody, all the comic book people were loving it. It was probably the movie that people wanted most was an X-Men movie.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so let me get back to number 9, which I already revealed mistakenly, which is Star Trek. And this is very near and dear to Michael's heart. I'm not a Trekkie, but I do have respect for the franchise.
I am a Trekkie. I'm not super hardcore Trekkie in that I have a cosplay outfit or anything like that, but I do have my strong opinions. I am definitely a Picard captain versus a Kirk. Don't get me wrong, I like Kirk, but for my bread and butter, it's got to be Picard every time. That said, and we'll probably cover this later when it's a little bit more appropriate, I fully admit that I'm not interested as much as I probably should be in the new show that's coming out, Star Trek Discovery. That said, I don't know why more people didn't go see Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah, still another one that I haven't seen yet. The first one, I saw it and I liked, but I haven't seen Beyond yet, and I'll see it at some point, but just not being a Trekkie, it doesn't have the magnetic draw to me.
And just to tie into that, I am a Trekkie, or let me put it this way, I am not devoted enough to have an opinion as to whether or not I should be called a Trekkie or a Trekker. I do know people that are very fiercely opinionated on that divide, whether or not they should be called one or the other. I'm okay with Trekkie.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's where, again, respect for it, staying power, the franchise is worth a lot of money if it could be given a monetary value, so it's up there. We couldn't deny it. And that leaves, of course, at number 10, number 1, however you want to look at it, the best, Star Wars.
Yeah, how can you not?
Right. I mean, Star Trek tried to put up a fight, but it couldn't get to that level. I'm sure throughout the show we're going to talk enough about Star Wars. It doesn't need to be justified at number 10, really.
Right. I mean, I will say, yes, obviously Star Trek came first, but they're different beasts.
Yeah, completely different beasts. And so with that, there's things that are not on this list, right? And that's where we don't know where to place everything. We need some help if people want to comment back or whatever. Lord of the Rings is not on here. We couldn't exactly find a spot to place it.
I could find a spot. But I'm not a Lord of the Rings fan, so...
Yeah, so see, there you go. I mean, that's Game of Thrones is not on here. It's not because we don't think it's good or anything. We just couldn't find a spot to place it. So, and we wanted to make it clear, right? We didn't want to have a bunch of 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5, 7.5, 7 3/4, all that. So we tried to get series that are different enough so it's a legitimate list where when something's better than something else. So
right, and this is, like I said, it's shorthand. This is kind of like what we're going to be basing our opinions on. And, those opinions might change, but we needed to have a starting point. This is kind of where we feel this range is. So when we talk about other films coming up, or other films, other movies, geek stuff, TV shows, comics, whatever, all the geek stuff there is.
And you don't have to agree, but this lets you know where we stand. We're trying to be transparent on where we stand in this geek universe.
Right, and even Alan and I, we don't agree on everything. I mean, there's some commonality, but...
Yeah, so there were spots on this list where we had some pretty tough debates, and that's where a lot of stuff did get left out. So you're going to hear this scale a lot as we talk about other things in the future, and it was a good way for us to lay some groundwork for the show.
Yeah. That's about it. Welcome to Radio Nerd America. This is our obsession. I hope you share it too.
What makes you think you can bullshit your way into my head? Like every other pencil-neck piece of shit!
Okay, kind of a cold open here. I'm talking about Star Wars, most specifically Rogue One, the new movie coming out.
And we're trying to gauge the excitement level we have right now for Rogue One against thinking back to The Force Awakens.
Correct. Like I said previously, Force Awakens, super excited about it. I saw it 4 times in the theater. I definitely enjoyed it. But looking back on it, I still enjoyed it. It's a fantastic movie. It's way better than any of the prequels, in my opinion. But it's one of those things where I think if you examine it a bit too closely, kind of it loses some of its luster. No, I'm not saying that Rogue One's not going to do that. It's just, I know it's dirtier, it's a little edgier.
Well, Rogue One's kind of starting, in a sense, almost from scratch, right? Because they have all new characters. Which that was hard. It was hard for me to get excited about it initially because I didn't have those existing characters to latch onto. But all the scenery, the weaponry, the vehicles, that's all sort of similar. We're used to that.
Yes.
Whereas Force Awakens, it was a continuation of all our favorite characters. So I think that was easier to get excited about that. And like you said, it's easy to then look back as adults, and we're all very critical now in this day and age, and nitpick the movie.
Yep.
But to be fair, it did have some sort of failures in the story writing and the plot and that kind of thing.
Exactly. But I mean, even whatever the failures were, it wasn't George Lucas writing it, and I think that was an improvement right there.
Yeah, and I think they had to do a lot of, kind of like when I think about some of the first Deadpool movie, right? They have to do a lot of sort of laying groundwork of this new era of Star Wars movies that they have to sort of pay homage and do all that kind of stuff. And now that's kind of out of the way, I think.
Yes.
So it'll free up creativity for the next few movies.
I agree. And to be simple about it, the Rebels and the Empire, they're at war. There's going to be battles. There's going to be death. This purports to be the first Star Wars war movie, if you will. So I am excited about that. I want to see a little bit grittier, a little bit more real. And I mean, I still get this fantasy. It's sort of sci-fi and all that, but I want a little bit of realism in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the prequel movies, because of the technology they had for episode 1, 2, and 3, they could show sort of more grander scale battles. But I think looking back, especially, they felt a lot more sort of PG. Whereas this one, it feels like it's maybe a solid PG-13, right, with a little bit more emotion and love and loss tied into the battles.
And I think that's interesting because here we are, less than a month away from the release, and as far as I know, the last few commercials I've seen and previews, it's still not rated.
I assumed it was PG-13, but I haven't noticed that it didn't have a rating.
It's still not rated yet. I have to believe there's no way in heck they're going to go above PG-13.
Right? No, of course
they're not gonna. But I find that this late in the game, no rating yet, it's making me wonder how many cuts they got to make.
Yeah, they might be making some last-minute edits or digital stuff with blood and arms flailing and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm really excited about it. Like I said, much more excited now that it's closer. Seeing it has a new name actually, I think, but I'm just going to still call it the AT-AT. Seeing multiples of those in an environment that isn't snowy is really excellent. Yes. The new droid, we don't know much about him.
Yes.
The sidekick droid. I think in the latest teasers, I've actually heard his voice a little bit, so I'm really excited about him. And then we know there's going to be all kinds of, hidden characters that we don't see until the movie actually shows.
Well, as a lifelong geek, I'm just excited at the fact that the droid is voiced by Alan. Is it Tudyk? Is that how you say his last name?
I don't know how to say it, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Wash from Firefly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the same guy. He has his own web series that he self-produced called Con Man. He is totally a geek through and through, and he knows who his audience is. So to see him now in Star Wars having even just a small part, as a geek who's seen him forever, it just kind of...
Well, let me throw this wild card in there, too. How much of Vader are we going to see? We saw just glimpses of him in the trailer, but let's throw out your guesstimate. I'm going to say Vader's going to be in 5% of the movie.
I would have to agree with that. I think too much Vader would be a bad thing just because you're pulling away too much. Maybe not pulling away, but obviously Vader was the big bad in the original trilogy. I don't want him to be the focus in this one.
Well, let's not forget, I think you're right. It's not going to be the focus, but this is still in his heyday of strength, power, and destruction. So I feel like they're not going to want to rely on him so much. They want it to be its own story, but at the same time, maybe he looms over everything, right? We got to remember too. We haven't really seen a movie where Vader was just badass through the whole thing, right? I mean, I think he did some force chokes and things of that in the original trilogy. And at the end of the first trilogy, we just saw him becoming Vader, the prequels. So somewhere along the way in here, we're going to need to. I think we deserve the full-on Vader.
Oh yeah, I'd like that, and that maybe. Obviously, I don't think this is the film for it, but I see where you're going there, and I think it'd be awesome. We already know they're doing a young Han Solo.
Yeah, we're going to get a Vader standalone. Is that coming?
I would love to see that. But as you said, Vader in his prime, slaying Jedi left and right.
I mean, could Vader be the Wolverine movie series within the X-Men series, right? Wolverine's getting his own movies. Is that how they can treat Vader? Like he's one of the only ones because of his strength of character. He can have 2 or 3 of his own movies.
That's a good question. The Marvel Comics did the Vader series, and that seems to have done very well. And that's showing him more in his prime. I have to admit I haven't read those, but now I'm interested to kind of take a look at those because that could be fertile ground for a new movie.
And they have James Earl Jones to take into account, right? Like if they're going to do the Vader thing, if they don't have him around anymore, that's a big loss. They're going to try to find some.
I think I read somewhere that he's recorded a bunch of extra.
Yeah, dialogue. I read that as well. So they'd have a bank to pull from,
just in case.
Yeah.
Because he is 89, 90 years old.
Yeah. He's only have a little bit of time left on the clock. And
fantastic voice, but
I would think if they recorded enough audio of him with the technology, they could go back and make his voice say anything, as long as of course they have the rights to his voice and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Which sometimes that's the biggest problem in these things, right? We know that with the Marvel universe is the legal side can be a pain in the ass.
I think Disney was smart enough to lock him in. I think he's there.
Okay, so let's just take a stab at it. Of all the movies, how many do we have now? The original prequel, or the original trilogy, the prequels, and Force Awakens. So we have seven movies.
Yep.
This one is going to place. This will be 8th. So from 1 to 8, where do you think this one's going to land? Best to worst.
Man, that's a tough call. And I'm really excited for it. My gut right now, it'll be interesting to see in a few weeks where it ends up, but I'm going to say, I'm going to go with number 2. This is going to be behind Empire. I know it's a bold thing.
Wow. So Empire than this.
That's where my excitement level is right now, yes.
Yeah, I would say I'm going to be a little bit more conservative, and I'm going to go 3 to 5. I'm going to automatically expect it to be better than the prequels, even though I did like the prequels for what they were. And I'm going to say it has a good chance to be better than The Force Awakens. So that puts it at 4, really, for me. And I'm going to give it the chance to be able to leapfrog over, either A New Hope or Jedi, possibly. But I'm thinking it's going to be no higher than 3 and no lower than 5.
Well, it's hard, too, because most fans will agree Empire is the best.
With the cliffhanger ending.
Yes. But it's hard. Maybe I shouldn't have said 2. But only because
you're backpedaling.
I'm not so much backpedaling yet. We'll see. It's just that it's hard not to give the original Star Wars, later A New Hope, its due, because none of this would exist without that movie.
Right, and it's going to be hard for us because we're so much more critical now. Like when we first saw Star Wars and fell in love with it, we weren't concerned about dialogue and effects and all these other things that were plot holes and all this stuff that we're super critical about now. So those are sort of like the untouchables, right? It's really hard for us to say something new is better than those, but we've got to try to be objective.
It's interesting you say that. I would like a little time machine just so we could go back 15 years, maybe 16, and talk to every 8 to 12-year-old kid that came out of the Phantom Menace, or any of that.
I love the Phantom Menace. I think I was in junior high, and I loved it. The pod racing scene. I mean, we're getting off into another topic here, but I get where you're going, and that's because I'm maybe a little bit younger than you. I'm a little bit more fond of, especially the Phantom Menace. That was my favorite of all 3.
I saw it, I think, at least 2 or 3 times in the theater, and then I don't know. I think with time, with age, it just hasn't aged very well for me personally. I remember liking it when it came out. But then you kind of look back on it, and you're like,
I don't know. I still look back on it with the rose-colored glasses, man. Every time I watch it, I mean, the Darth Maul music, the score of his music.
There's no question that
there's so many good. Now, again, the music is a separate thing. I think everybody could probably agree if you look back, the music on that movie was as good as the other movies.
Oh yeah, I mean, you got John Williams 40 years ago versus John Williams now. He's had 40 years to hone his edge. He's just a much better composer now, I think.
And I think we could. I don't think this is going too far of a limb. Darth Maul, the second best villain of the entire Star Wars galaxy. So, they had a nice trump card there with him.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to deny that Phantom Menace didn't have its moments. It has the best lightsaber battle out of all the movies so far. Can it be upped? Yeah, we can see. But even the last one, Force Awakens, when you have Ren versus first Finn and then...
we already don't know the names of the characters. They're too new to us. We don't have enough mental equity to them. The girl, right?
Finn and the girl. It sounds awful to say that. Finn and the girl. Oh my God, what is her name?
See, I have Jyn Erso on my brain.
Right. That's why I keep wanting to say Jyn, but it's not Jyn. It's
The audience is absolutely going crazy right now. If this was a radio channel, they're all changing the channel as we speak.
Yeah.
But what you were going to say about her was that she had the battle as well, the lightsaber battle. You were talking about the best lightsaber battles.
Yes. It was fine. I enjoyed it. But you've got someone that's obviously well-practiced, like Ren, fighting and against two novices.
Yeah.
It was never going to be epic.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the guy, and I always forget his name too, doing him a great disservice, but the guy that plays Darth Maul, and he's played Toad in the X-Men movies, and he's played kinds of... Ray Park. That's right. I mean, he's amazing. For what he does, he's amazing.
His physicality.
Yeah, the physicality, what he brings to the role, he can take martial art forms and mold them and shape them into a way that seems alien or seems like a new fighting style that we've never seen before, so... he brought a lot to that role. I mean, there's a lot of things in Phantom Menace that I think were good, but I think it's also, we can agree that the second episode and the third episode I think they got worse.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you on that. I'm probably going to go against the popular opinion here when I say that Revenge of the Jedi, or Revenge of the Sith, I didn't love it like a lot of people did.
I didn't love it either. I mean, I think it kind of was like a necessary evil sort of thing. Now, I liked it. Don't get me wrong. It's Star Wars, so I like it. It automatically goes way to the top of my list above many other things. But it's like it had so much to deliver. There was no way it could possibly live up to expectations. Because I remember talking with people before it was coming out, and we were trying to figure out, well, are we going to get full Vader, or what we actually got was just the introduction of how he became Vader. Right. And there was just a lot of ground to cover there.
I would like to have seen more.
But the good news is, because it didn't cover too much time, it leaves that giant space and time open to the universe to fit in a bunch of movies like we're doing right now with Rogue One. And there can be multiple other ones in there too, because it left, I don't know, what was it, 18 years or something, or 16 years from the end of that to episode 4.
Yes, exactly. So, what's really bothering me? Rey.
Rey. It's too simple of a name. I think I kept trying to think of her actual name, the real woman's name, the actor.
God, I can't believe that is such a geek follow there, not remember.
Okay, so I mean, to wrap this up, what did we say here? I said Rogue One is going to be either the third or at worst the fifth best Star Wars movie. You didn't backpedal completely. You said it was going to be the second best one.
Yeah, I'll stick with that. Just maybe on a nostalgic level, I would have to put Star Wars higher at some point.
I mean, it does have Forest Whitaker.
Forest Whitaker is awesome. I'm going to stick with 2 for now.
By the way, who was very underutilized in the movie The Arrival.
Oh, yeah, we can segue into that. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, I saw it day of. I was looking forward to it big time. I read the short story because I saw a lot of stuff on IO9 talking about, it's great, and it was getting these rave reviews, so I'm like, well, I got to go read the backstory. So I read the short story. Yeah, so it was amazing.
I didn't read the story. I think I read a brief synopsis of it on Wiki, just to kind of get an idea. But I was so excited for that movie. I went and saw it all by myself on a Sunday morning.
Good. Well done. You get to keep your nerd card for that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it too much of a simple segue, but he was really underutilized in that movie. He kind of was just sort of almost like a placeholder. I mean, even they talked about his accent was kind of funny. Like, what kind of accent was that? I mean, I love Forest Whitaker. That's why I'm talking about it in this way. It was like, I love the movie. I'm like, man, we could have used him more, but it was great without him.
Right. I think it was just a small role to begin with, and maybe he just wanted to be in the movie. Maybe he just wanted to work with that director because his role really is pretty insignificant, and it would have been nice just because of his power and his acting ability to see him in a larger role. But maybe someone different should have been in the role just so it wasn't. Because it was not much of a role. Right?
No, like you said, he could have just been, friends with the director or the writer, or it's just something he wanted to be a part of because he liked the story. Who knows? I mean, I don't get that deep into it, but yeah, I was surprised that he had kind of such a small role. But then that's what I'm saying. That could be the wild card in Rogue One if he has a big role and plays this great character. I think that's part of it, right? Do you have great actors playing great characters that really make it last a long time and feel great?
Right. And what also is interesting. I have to admit, I didn't watch all of it, but did you watch any of the Clone Wars cartoons or
the first couple seasons?
Same here.
I watched, and then I think the third, fourth, it's fallen off, and I'm trying to keep up on Rebels. So I've probably watched half or maybe 3/4 of all the Rebels episodes.
Gotcha. Because that's all canon now.
Yeah, no, and it's great. I like the Rebel stuff a lot, and I'm hoping all of these side projects, whether we're talking about Marvel or Star Wars or whatever the universe is. I love it when they completely tie in at some point and dovetail with the main source material.
Oh, and you're exactly right, because that's exactly what's happening. Forest Whitaker is playing Saw. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but he harkens back to the Clone Wars cartoon.
Okay. Yeah, because the Clone Wars cartoon, I mean, it's going a few years back, so I remember very little of it. By the way, I didn't care for the animation style in that cartoon a lot, and that's what kind of hurt it with me. It was a little more juvenile in my taste, but there was some good material in there, right? There was all about the ins and outs of the Clone Wars, but yeah, so that'll be interesting to see what this movie kind of harkens back to, other than just the Death Star. I
agree, but kind of swing it back to Forest Whitaker and more to the point, Arrival. I thought the whole movie was fascinating, and it's not really a twist, but kind of how it ended just kind of made me go, wow, that was something. Now I know. There's the theory that, learning different languages can affect different parts of your brain and essentially kind of re-hardwire your brain in a certain way.
I somewhat subscribe to that theory, by the way. I might as well throw that out there.
And then that's fine. It's a very neat theory, and I think what I've read online is basically that some linguists have kind of dismissed that. That's not the case. But still, it makes you think, because whether or not it re-hardwires your brain, thinking in a different language is going to affect what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Language, no matter what, no matter how many words are in the language or anything, language is going to be a limit as to your thought process.
Yeah.
Because you can only use the words that you know.
Yeah, I mean, because, not to get too far off into the science side of it, but, working with some people internationally and stuff, and you work with some people and you know that they're, like, really, really smart, right? Way smarter than I am. They know so much more than I do. But because their English is only half as good as mine, it's limiting, and you have to sort of remember, like, I need to try to get the information out of them because they have it. They're smarter than me. It's just a language barrier.
Exactly. Just touching on that with the Arrival, it was interesting to see how learning the written language of the heptapods changed her perspective on things and really had a lot of influence on her life later. It was just...
Yeah, I mean, in the short story, and again, it's only a short story. I don't know, you could read the whole thing in probably 45 minutes, but it delved a little bit into the science of the linguistics of it a little bit more. Not a ton, but they really. I remember they were more specific about why it's important that the written language is different from the spoken language. And I think they touched on it in the movie, but I remember in the story they gave a little bit more examples that helped to clarify and understand like why that matters. And that was really cool. And the thing about how, it was a short thing in the movie. I think most people caught it, but it was like the idea that as you write the sentence, you're writing it all at once. Like you're writing the end of it and the beginning of it at the same time. And that was really cool because that really ties into this element of time, right?
Yes.
You have to know what the end is before you start writing the beginning. And that's where the time lapse thing comes in.
Which kind of fit into the heptapods and their view and how they existed and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing, like you said, the sort of reveal at the end or whatever, when I read the book, I remember getting to the end, and I knew there was something that just happened, right? Something at the end that happened that I was supposed to get, right? So, okay, spoiler alert here for one. I think it's been long enough for sure. But so at the end of the short story, I was still sort of confused who died. if the husband had died or if the daughter had died, and I was still also kind of confused of, did the daughter's life happen before the alien arrival or after? Again, if I would have went back and reread it, it would have been probably clear. I didn't have the time. That just after one read, I wasn't quite sure of the sequence of those things.
Right.
So then when the movie came and showed it, that was like so much more clear. Which, for a lazy viewer, that's what movies are usually good for. But it really helped tie it together for me of like the sequence. Because from the book, it was hard. It was a lot of, because the story is so dense with all the science and the time travel and stuff. It was hard to really understand at the end what the reveal was.
And that's the thing. When I see a movie like this, I'm happy. I like hard sci-fi, and that's what this is. I think I read in a previous review, there's only one explosion in the whole movie, really.
Yeah, it's very, very much story and dialogue based here, right?
I think they said one of the biggest action sequences when she, wrote a sentence, and that's true.
Yeah.
This is not an action movie. This is not. And I think everyone should know that by now.
It's not a shoot 'em up, kill 'em all.
Right. It's not Independence Day. It's hard sci-fi, and I like hard sci-fi, and I like that we're seeing more and more of it. Like Ex Machina. That was another good one.
Or I heard a lot, even when I went to the theater, the popcorn girl asked me, "Oh, what movie are you going to see?" And we told her Arrival, and she said, "Oh, well, you're going to like it if you liked Interstellar." Now, I'm not sure what to think about that for our true sci-fi geeks, but I kind of felt like Interstellar was much more wide-reaching, right, with the space travel and going to different galaxies and black. So I think it was a smarter sci-fi movie, more science-based, but I think it was using a lot of those different worlds and spaceships and stuff a lot more than Arrival does.
Which did you like better?
Arrival. Now, I really liked Interstellar, but to me, Arrival is so new and fresh take on this sort of alien contact movie.
Oh yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I liked Interstellar, but I think when I left it, I was expecting a little bit more. I don't know what I was expecting. I still love that it was hard sci-fi. I fully support that. Like I said, I didn't dislike the movie in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I think the ending of The Arrival, although, this sort of time travel thing is pretty amazing, right? But we all have wrapped our mind around that idea. We've all sort of sat and daydreamed about time travel. Whereas the ending of Interstellar, it's almost impossible to pull off visually, right? Like they had to figure out, how are we going to show this sort of black hole, multiverse, the bookshelf thing, right? Okay, so the bookshelf thing probably wasn't really meant to be literal, but they had to have some sort of vehicle to show this concept. And I think that's where Interstellar struggle is. At the end, you're kind of left with like, what the hell happened kind of thing, and that was really odd and crazy. But I feel like they painted themselves into a hole with that theory that it's almost impossible to show it visually. Whereas Arrival, it's a little bit easier to put a bow on it at the end, I think.
I can see that. And perhaps the Arrival, I should say, it was easier to put a bow on because that's kind of where the story went. For me, Interstellar, that bow on the end was a little bit too... I mean, it wasn't the happiest. It wasn't certainly a Spielberg ending. It wasn't like... the end of War of the Worlds, where suddenly, hey, everyone that needs to be alive is alive, and everyone's happy, and it's great.
Birds are singing.
Right, exactly. It wasn't quite that, and it was nice to see Matthew McConaughey's character, contact his daughter when she was younger, yada yada. But it was a little too saccharine for me. Not too much, but a little bit too much. Whereas Arrival. Well, I wouldn't say the ending is saccharine. Or you could kind of see it that way, too. Bittersweet.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily give you what you want, right?
Right.
I mean, I think in the Interstellar, there was a little bit of sense of that it gave you what you wanted, right? That the connection between daughter and father and, the books, it tied the books falling off the bookshelf back together and all that. Whereas Arrival, it was sort of sad in a way. Because, look, the daughter dies. Mom and dad get divorced.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, we already covered spoiler. But yeah, so it's like it's definitely not happily ever after. I mean, you can tell that Amy Adams' character is okay. She's fine. She's not like devastating her life. She moves on, which I think is a big undertone of the story. But it definitely is not in any way a sort of happy ending.
No, and I mean she has to tussle with a big decision there. With if you're going to give birth to a child and know that child is going to die before you, do you still go through with it? But then that opens a whole other thing. Did she have a choice to not go through with it? Just because she saw these events coming forward, could she change them? Then we're getting a little bit deep there.
Yeah, that's when you can have an argument that can never be solved, right?
Right.
Because nobody knows. But I do like that they made it that they got divorced when she shared that news with her husband, because it harkened back to when they first met. Right, when they first met, it was very clear that they sort of, used, I don't want to overuse this phrase, but like, one was left brain, one was right brain or whatever, right? They had different takes on science and in learning and intelligence.
Yep.
Very different.
Yes.
They came together through this project, we'll call it, and then, but when this real life thing with their daughter came up, again, it was clear that they both felt and thought very different ways, so different, in fact, that they couldn't cope with it.
Yep. Yeah. And I fully admit that the movie got me in that I thought it started with flashbacks. And then you find out, nope.
Right, flash forward.
Yes.
That was the thing in the book. So when I read the book and then saw the movie, it was clear to me because of the visual cues of the house and stuff like that, that they were flashbacks. But reading the book, it was the same as what you said. I didn't know if it was a flash forward or a flashback.
Right.
And I don't even think they gave the husband, what's the actor's name? Hawkeye.
Oh, Jeremy Renner.
Jeremy Renner. I don't even think in the short story, I don't remember if they hashed out his character and even had a lot of dialogue with him. I think it was mostly Amy Anderson's character referring to your father, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think they had to film it that way to make sure you kept questioning whether it was a flashback or not. Because obviously if they had shown him and right away, and then they show them meet, you're like, wait a second.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying in the book, though, in the short story, they like you barely even know who the Jeremy Renner's character is even part of the story.
Oh, okay.
Like, so at least on the first reading, it's much more vague of who he is and how he's tied to the arrival, the actual scientific event that they were going into. But, segue to some other stuff, the spaceships, very interesting, the sort of internal atmosphere, internal gravity control devices, the way they disappeared at the end was just sort of vaporizing. They have these doors that sort of open and close, right? That seems like a very mechanical thing, which is a little bit interesting versus a transportation of getting people in. That part of it was all pretty cool as well. Yes.
I mean, and it ties into also the fact, we know that the heptapods have an interesting relation when it comes to time. They can obviously experience it. I think it just shows that their technology really ties into that whole space and time are connected. So why wouldn't they be able to manipulate gravity?
Yeah, and they throw that carrot out there of the heptapods need the humans, 3,000 years in the future or something. So it's like that they may never, ever come back to that, right? That could be completely insignificant. It could be 100 years, 3,000 years, whatever, because there may never be another movie. But that was just a cool part, right? Because it puts it in scope. 3,000 years is a long time, and it lets you know that the heptapods think longer term, longer scale, when we have trouble thinking more than 5 years in the future, I think.
Oh, yeah, you think about us. Modern society hasn't even been around 3,000 years.
Yeah, well, not even close, right? So, yeah, I thought that part of it was really cool to give. I thought the movie, again, and I mentioned even on Facebook about the timing of that movie with what happened with the election week, right? It gave this really good sense, I think, of long-term thinking, knowing what's going to happen in the future, things that are happening that are bad right now, like you're going to get through them, and in the future you're going to look back and you're not going to wish anything was any different, right?
Oh, yeah.
That whole part of the story was amazing to me. That's what I loved about that movie.
Yes, fantastic movie. Fantastic movie. All right, so there you have it. This has been our first episode of Radio Nerd America. We'll be launching next week into maybe something not completely sci-fi related, but we're going to talk about high school reunion.
Yeah, and so some of the topics we're going to get into are going to be just sort of nerdy things to talk about, and nerd culture is a big part of high school, of course. For some people good, some people bad. So that's going to be one of the topics we're going to get into, and we're just going to tease it a little bit here with a couple saucy statements.
Well, let's face it. If you're a geek or a nerd or whatever you want to give your label, and you're into this kind of stuff, like we are, This is probably not a new revelation for you. This is probably something that has been around since probably at least junior high, high school, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
How much interest do you have in going back and seeing the people you went to high school with? Is there even reason to do that anymore?
Some of you may not have even had a chance to have a high school reunion yet. Some of us may have had 2 or 3. So we're going to get into that a little bit and talk about the what, why, and how of it.
Yeah, I mean, kind of touching on technology on that aspect. I mean, in the world of Facebook with the unending friendships, is there really even a need to have a high school reunion anymore?
Good point. Good point.
So that's where we leave you this week. Have a good one. Stay safe, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Yep. Take care, nerds.
All right, bye.